And honestly, I guess, yeah, years. Like 11 years. So, the nurses there said, you have to call a taxi and we'll pay for the taxi service, part of my insurance thing, coverage. And I said, okay. And so they called the taxi. The man arrived. I'm sure that man remembers me. I have no doubt. And he was very nice. My son was there with me as well. He said, and I said, just a minute, I need to get my son's car seat. So nobody told me. They just expected me to get into this cab with the cab driver and take my son home, like probably a lot of people have done in the past. And I said, wait a second, I need to go to my car and get my son's car seat. So I went to my car, I got this car seat that was buckled in, which he'd been using. Or actually, I got the one I think that was on the floor, because I thought, well, I don't have to unbuckle it and mess with all of that. So then I took the car seat that was on the floor, the one that the police or the firemen said I could use, regardless of which one I chose. And this was within a week. So this wasn't like a couple months later. This whole situation happened a couple days to a week after I picked up my new car seat for my son. So, you know, he didn't grow a ton in that time. It didn't really matter which one I used. So I picked up the one that was already not fastened into the seat, so it'd be easier to carry and put into this cab. And the cab driver said, could you help me with this? And the cab driver helped hold my son, or I think he helped buckle it while I was holding my son or trying to fasten something. And then I said, okay, now we can go. So then he drove me to my house, and I had to leave my car there in the hospital parking lot. Well, my car was not parked right next to the sidewalk where everybody would walk by. My car was parked way out in the parking lot. I mean, like where nobody would go unless they were specifically trying to find my vehicle and look in the windows. So all of a sudden, I found out later that one of the nurses made a complaint to CPS and said she had walked over to the to my car, or they complained that I had left the hospital without a car seat for my son. And why any nurse would make that complaint, the only kind of nurse that would make a complaint like that I'd left the hospital with my son, is somebody who would assume that I would just jump into the cab with my son and not care about the car seat, who might have then also hoped that that's what would have happened and gone out to find my car in like this whole huge group of vehicles that were out in the lot and looked inside my car windows, and then seeing this car seat strapped into the back, assumed that since that car seat was there, I left without a car seat, and aha, they caught me. So I mean, this entire thing is a setup and an excuse to harass me further and have CPS come out. And I found out that one of the first individuals, actually, that happened, I take that back, that was maybe the second time that I was harassed. Because the first time I found out was coming from Tina Thornton. So I was going to this counselor who was her best friend, Brett McDonald, the one who never wanted me to talk about the FBI. And I found out that Tina Thornton decided to, what was it over? I can't remember what it was over. It was over something very, very small. And she decided, I think it was because I was asking her about my refund check. and they were telling me they weren't going to pay me. And so then all of a sudden she decided to make a complaint over to CPS. She was social services, and they're kind of separate, but not really. Like, they have a wall in between them, and that's about it. So she was social services, and then CPS is child protective services. So when I kept asking about what had happened with my check, she then reported me secretly to CPS and made some kind of a comment or query that made me sound bad. And she told me in this same meeting, I think that's all she did. She just put sort of a question mark comment over to CPS for something, but it was retaliation. And there wasn't even any actual event or reason that she was like citing. She was just doing this for a reason. And then then she got promoted. She got a raise. She got offered a job through CPS, and she got a raise after she did this to me and my son. So even if she did write up this one thing, I think that the first time that I was approached by CPS was because of this car seat thing. It was. So then I'm at my house with my son, and CPS was knocking at my, yelling at me from the window. And actually, I think first they called me, and I answered the phone. They said, "We're outside of your house. Can we come inside?" And I looked out my window, and my son was taking a nap. He was sleeping. And I looked out the window, and there they were, two of them. And it was a woman by the name of Mary Bridges, who was Judge John Bridges' wife. This is a judge in town who probably doesn't know Gerald Warren, the judge, at all, right? I mean, they just are only Catholic and go to the same church. And are both judges in a very small town. So Judge John Bridges' wife, who worked for CPS, conveniently, was coming to my house and saying that they had a report and they wanted to talk to me about some things. And I said no because I knew I had a right to say no unless they had a warrant. And my son was sleeping, and I had let them know that my son was sleeping, and if they wanted to come back at a different time or talk about something, that would be fine. So then after that they left, and I talked to them over the phone. I said, "Well, what is it about? We can talk about this." So they called, and they told me what this report was over. It was about that car seat thing. So I gave them all the information. I said, "Here's the name of the cab company. The name of and the cab driver was this such and such man. And this is his name." I said, "And here's the name of the fireman that I just got this car seat from a week before this happened at the hospital, or less." I said, "You can check with those individuals and find out for yourself whether or not I took a car seat with my son back to my house." And I said, "I think it's a little strange that someone would actually go out into the parking lot trying to look for something to use against me." So then they dropped it. I mean, they had to close it. They closed the entire, they have to quote unquote, they don't necessarily investigate, they just do a little query first or whatever and respond to a complaint. And they had to close the entire thing as, I believe it was called unfounded, because there's no merit to it whatsoever. There are no facts, there's no witness, there's no merit, and it's actually been proven to be false. So everything, the information I gave them showed that this was a completely false accusation, and something I could tangibly prove with evidence. So then the next thing they wanted to do is they said, "Come in," the next thing what that happened is Tina Thornton called me, and she said, "I would like to meet you in my office." So I went to her offices, and she said, "I have an offer for you." And I asked what that was about, and she said, "Well, we would like to offer you and your son we'd like to help you relocate to a different area. Since you can't get any health care here, maybe you can just move to a different state." And she said, "So we talked to Utah, and we will give you and your son, she made the entire excuse all about how since I couldn't get health care locally there, and since they were refusing to reimburse my mileage to Seattle, they were telling me to move out of the state to Utah, which is the state that put these microchip implants into my body in the first place. So she was saying, we will give you, I said, you're offering this? I said, I didn't think social services did this kind of thing. And she said, no, CPS is making the offer. And I said, well, they already closed the case. And she said, well, they're making an offer for you if you don't want to be harassed anymore, or since you can get health care somewhere else, of a one-way bus ticket for you and your son to move out of the state. And, you know, thinking about it, I had grounds for a major lawsuit for medical malpractice for me and my son, and the only way that I could file that was to be in the state of Washington. And then all of a sudden, I had people blocking me from going to Seattle because they were worried that if I'm there getting medical care for my son, I might also go to a law office. So basically, doctors and medical professionals didn't want to get sued because it would have been a really big lawsuit, or a very large settlement sum. So then all of a sudden I'm being told we can leave Washington for Utah. And imagine what kinds of things they had planned for me in Utah. I mean, my first thought is, well, Utah should be nice people who are just Mormon and conservative people, and I'm sure they are in some parts of Utah, but that's where they had their whole NASA, Department of Defense telesurgery, teletorture stuff going on. And that's the group that in 1995 put implants, microchip implants in me to begin with, and then got a big payoff. So what were exactly they expecting to happen? I had migraines triggered in the state of Washington, so I'm going to go to Utah and have my migraines triggered so I can show up at the medical facilities there and they can do more research on me, on how they're torturing me and basically keeping me out of any kind of work and livelihood. It's basically just anti-competition. So I said, okay, I'll think about it. I didn't tell her no right then and there. She said she made the offer, told me that CPS was presenting it, and it was through Mary Bridges, and that to think about it and let her know. So I did go home, and I thought about it. And I thought no, because I would not be able to get a law firm for these damages that are going to cost my son a lot in his future, and have already caused a lot of harm and pain and suffering to him, and which were still causing me pain and suffering. I mean, I still couldn't work because of the pain and suffering. I mean, I was still mobile and moving around with my son, but it's not like I could sit for long periods of time because of the pain there, and I couldn't stand for an extended period of time. I mean, and there were not a lot of jobs in that town to begin with. So what I had done is I had gone to the daycare licensing place to look into that, but they didn't want me to do that. They just wanted me out of the state, completely out of the state. And when I turned down their offer, CPS and that entire community decided to collude against me worse, and they just began harassing me with one unfounded, unreasonable CPS complaint after another. And during that time, my son and I then began to experience much worse forms of torture as well. And I think that that's what I think that's what I have to say for right now. So I really need to keep going though, because I would at least like to get to the point to where my son and I left for Canada.